I walked into that fancy restaurant with my heart beating a little faster than usual. It wasn't that I hadn't been in nice places before, but this was different. It was a family brunch, something we didn't do often, and I hadn't seen everyone in a while. I had taken extra care getting ready that morning. My dress wasn't expensive, but it was neat, clean, and simple. I wore the same shoes I'd worn to my last job interview. My hair was tied in a soft bun, and I had even added a little touch of lipstick. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I just wanted to feel like I belonged. As I stepped in and spotted our table, I saw my sister laughing, tossing her hair back like she always did when she was in her element. Her friends were there too, well-dressed, loud, confident. The moment she saw me, her face changed. That familiar smirk crept in, the one she used when she was about to make me feel small. "Oh wow," she said loudly as I approached the table. "Did you walk here or get lost in a thrift store?" Everyone at the table laughed. Some gave polite chuckles, but most just looked at me and then at her like they were waiting for more. I froze in place for a moment, forcing a weak smile and sitting down quietly. My palms were already sweating. I told myself not to let it get to me, not this time, not in front of everyone. But then she added, "Some people just don't try hard enough, you know? Like if you're still unemployed after all this time, maybe it's not the economy, maybe it's you." There was laughter again, louder this time. One of her friends said something like, "You're savage." And my sister just leaned back, proud of herself. I sat there, staring at my glass of water, wishing I could disappear. I didn't want to cry, not there, not with those eyes on me. So I looked away and focused on breathing slowly. No one defended me. Not my aunt, not even my cousin who I used to babysit. Everyone just looked a little uncomfortable but said nothing. I felt like a child again, powerless, invisible, and completely exposed. My appetite disappeared. The menu blurred in front of me. I couldn't even remember what I'd come there for. Was it just food? Was it family? Or was I just hoping for a little bit of kindness? I didn't speak a word through most of the brunch. I just nodded when someone spoke to me and tried to smile when the camera came out. But I wasn't there anymore. Not really. I had retreated deep inside myself where it was quiet, where I could pretend I didn't feel this sting in my chest. When the waiter brought dessert, I stood up. I told them I had an early appointment and needed to leave. My sister just raised an eyebrow and said, "Of course you do." I didn't even respond. I walked out, keeping my head down, holding back tears until I reached the car. As soon as I closed the door, I broke down. The tears came hot and fast. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know why it hurt so much. After all, it wasn't the first time she had embarrassed me in front of others. But something about today felt different. It wasn't just about being mocked. It was the way no one stood up for me, the way they all laughed like I was the joke. And in that moment, sitting alone in that car, I realized something deep had cracked inside me. We weren't always like this. There was a time long ago when my sister and I were inseparable. We used to share a room, giggle late into the night, and sneak cookies from the kitchen when we thought Mom wasn't watching. I used to think she was the funniest, brightest person I knew. She had a way of lighting up a room even as a kid. People were drawn to her laughter, her charm, her energy. And I was always the quiet one, the observer, the helper. When we played pretend, she was always the princess or the movie star, and I didn't mind being the one behind the scenes. I was happy just being close to her. I did her homework when she was tired, helped her sneak notes to boys at school, even took the blame for things she broke around the house. She called me her sweet little shadow, and back then it felt like love. But I started noticing things. Our parents always praised her. "Look at how confident she is," they'd say. "She's going to be something big one day." And I was the responsible one. The one who made her lunch, folded laundry, helped Mom without being asked. But no one clapped for that. No one noticed. She got used to being adored and I got used to being invisible. Still, I never hated her for it. Not once. Even when it hurt. Even when I felt small. I always believed she didn't mean it. That she didn't know. But over time she changed. Her jokes started to cut deeper. Her smiles came with a bite. And one day I realized something cold and sharp. She wasn't just careless with my feelings. She enjoyed seeing me break. After that painful brunch, I drove home and sat in my small apartment for hours, thinking about how far I'd come, how much they didn't know about me. Because what my sister said at that table wasn't true. Not anymore. Yes, there was a time I struggled. I lost my job during the pandemic just like so many others. I was laid off with nothing but a polite email and a final paycheck that barely lasted 2 months. First I felt ashamed. Useless. Like my worth had been tied to a title on a business card that no longer existed. But one night, sitting alone with a cup of tea in my thoughts, I remembered how much people used to love my cooking. I remembered the potlucks, the way coworkers would line up for my lasagna, my pies, my soups. That memory lit a tiny flame inside me and I held on to it. I started cooking again, not for joy but for survival. I created a small menu, posted it online in a local Facebook group and offered delivery. Just a few meals a day. Nothing fancy. Just warm, honest food made from scratch. People started ordering. Not in droves but enough to keep the lights on. During the day I worked tables at a diner. And at night I took online classes in business and culinary management. I'd come home exhausted, feet aching, eyes burning, but I was building something. Slowly, quietly, without applause. My food gained a little following among local professionals. Lawyers, doctors, even a city council member. Word of mouth spread. I didn't use my real name for the business, just a simple brand name with no photo, no bio. I wanted it that way. I wanted to grow without judgment, without the weight of anyone's expectations. Then one afternoon I delivered a meal to a man named Mr. Lawrence. He was retired, lived alone and always ordered the same thing. Lemon rosemary chicken and peach cobbler. After a few deliveries he started asking questions. About the recipes, the spices, where I learned to cook. One day he invited me to stay for tea. Hesitant but curious, I accepted. Over several cups he shared his story. He was a retired investor, once a restaurant owner himself, and he said my food reminded him of his mother's cooking. I didn't know what to say. I just smiled and thanked him. A few weeks later he made me an offer, a silent partnership. He'd invest in opening a small restaurant, something cozy and elegant, and I'd run it however I saw fit. I was stunned. Me? The girl my own sister laughed at in public? I couldn't believe it. But I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister. Not my parents. I kept it all to myself like a precious secret. Not because I wanted to be sneaky but because I knew they wouldn't see it for what it was. They'd ask too many questions, try to make it theirs or worse. Mock it before it even had a chance. So I signed the paperwork quietly. I picked the location, worked with a designer, tested new recipes. Every decision was mine. For the first time in my life I felt in control. I was no longer the invisible one, the helper in the shadows. I was building something real. Something mine. And all while the people who thought I had nothing still laughed behind my back. Let them. They didn't know who I was becoming. Months went by and I poured everything into the restaurant. I was up before sunrise, testing recipes, managing staff, greeting guests. The place quickly earned a reputation. People called it warm, elegant, comforting. They didn't just come for the food, they came for the feeling. That feeling I used to give everyone but rarely got in return. Then one evening, out of the blue, my sister invited me to dinner. I was cautious but I said yes. We met at a trendy little place she used to frequent, the kind she used to say was too nice for someone like me. She looked tired. The light in her eyes wasn't as bright, and her voice didn't carry the same confident edge. Between bites of salad she sighed and said, "My company's struggling." I nodded slowly, feigning concern. "We're looking for funding. Investors are pulling out. It's been rough." I stirred my drink and said all the right things. "I'm sorry to hear that," I murmured. "I hope it works out." What she didn't know was that just 2 weeks before, I had completed the quiet purchase of 70% of her company. Through Mr. Lawrence and a few other connections I'd built along the way, I had bought it piece by piece, quietly, patiently. She had no idea her startup now belonged to the same jobless nobody she humiliated over brunch. But fate wasn't done with her yet. A few weeks later, one of my restaurant managers handed me a resume during our morning meeting. I glanced at the name and blinked. It was hers. My sister. Applying to work as a hostess at my restaurant. Apparently she didn't recognize the brand name. She probably thought it was just another cozy bistro that popped up in the city overnight. She was desperate, I could tell. The kind of desperation she never showed before. I told the manager to hire her. She started the next day. Dressed up like she was still a CEO, trying to act in control of a life that was quietly slipping out of her hands. And she still didn't know. She had no idea the restaurant floor she stood on was mine. The walls, the menu, the smiling guests, all of it mine. I watched from the office camera that first night, sitting alone in my quiet office above the dining room, sipping tea while she greeted guests, smiled through gritted teeth, and took orders from someone she would have once called beneath her. She didn't recognize the woman behind it all because she never really looked at me. She never saw who I truly was. But now, she would. It didn't take long for me to notice the shift in her. Not just in her appearance but in the way she carried herself. My sister, the one who once walked into every room like she owned it, now worked under my roof. But the arrogance, the air of superiority, it was still there. It didn't matter that she was now a mere hostess in a restaurant. She still acted like she was entitled to more. She wore that same smirk, that same condescending tone even when greeting customers. She treated the kitchen staff like they were beneath her and snapped at anyone who didn't meet her standards, even if they were just doing their job. I watched it all unfold from behind the scenes. The cameras in the dining area showed her cold interactions, and the monitors in the office kept me updated on her every move. Every evening I sat there, silently observing as she strutted around, expecting everyone to cater to her like she was still the queen of the world. I couldn't help but shake my head. If only she knew how much she'd lost. I didn't intervene though. I didn't need to. I let my manager Tony handle the issues that popped up. He was the one who dealt with her complaints, her drama, her sense of entitlement. I just sat back and watched. She complained about everything, the low pay, the long hours, the tiring work. And it was almost laughable. She didn't know that I controlled it all. She didn't know the very paychecks she was complaining about were signed by me, from the business she thought she had nothing to do with. She had no idea the extent of my power. And I wasn't about to tell her. Not yet. But then one evening something happened. Something that snapped the fragile thread of my patience. I was going through the evening reports when I heard raised voices from the dining area. The noise was enough to draw my attention and I quickly switched to the live feed. It was her. She was standing at the front podium, hands on her hips, glaring down at one of the new servers, a young woman who had only started a few weeks ago. I could see the frustration in the poor girl's eyes as she tried to explain something, but my sister wasn't having it. "Just get it right," my sister snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "How many times do I have to tell you?" The server was trying to calm her down, but my sister's insults kept coming. "You're wasting my time. Maybe you should just go back to your old job if you can't handle this." The girl's face flushed red. She looked like she wanted to cry, but she kept her composure. And I felt a fire burn inside me. The nerve. The arrogance. It was like nothing had changed and it made my blood boil. It was time. I had been patient, I had let her think she was still in control. But I was done watching her tear people down. She had already humiliated me enough. It was time for her to learn the hard way. The next morning I told Tony to have a meeting with my sister. He was to let her know she'd be assigned a new role. One that came with a slight pay raise but also a little more responsibility. I made sure to choose the timing carefully, ensuring that it would catch her off guard. After all, the new responsibilities wouldn't be what she expected. When Tony walked up to her at the beginning of her shift, her attitude was as usual, arrogant, but something shifted when he spoke. She didn't know what was coming, but I did. I watched as she listened to him explain the new role, a confused look slowly spreading across her face. The realization would hit her soon and I was going to make sure she understood. She thought she was just working a regular shift. But today she was working under me. And soon enough she would realize just how much control I had over her life. I smiled quietly to myself as I continued to watch, knowing that her world was about to turn upside down. The day I had been waiting for finally arrived. I had everything carefully planned, every detail perfectly in place. I called a staff meeting for that afternoon, something I usually did only when we had updates to share or important changes to discuss. But this time it wasn't going to be business as usual. I wasn't just any boss. Today I was going to reveal the truth she had no idea was lurking just beneath her nose. I dressed professionally like I always did when I needed to make an impact. A tailored suit, clean lines, a sharp look that spoke authority. I wanted this moment to be powerful and I wanted her to feel the weight of the truth crashing down on her. I walked into the restaurant's main dining area, where the entire staff had gathered in anticipation. The room quieted as I entered and the staff, unaware of the revelation about to unfold, clapped politely. But I noticed her right away. She was standing near the back, her arms crossed, and she looked confused. The applause was just background noise to her. but her eyes met mine, and I could tell she was wondering why I had called this meeting. I didn't waste any time. I walked over to the front, the small crowd parting to make way. I stood tall for a moment, letting the silence settle before I spoke. "Thank you all for gathering today," I began, my voice steady but with an edge that made them all listen closely. "Today I have something important to share with you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a simple plaque, one that had been made to match the tone of the restaurant. I set it down on the counter in front of me, ensuring everyone could see the name engraved on it. Her face immediately turned from confusion to shock as she read the name on the plaque. It was my name. My full name in clear letters. She looked at me, eyes widening, lips parting in disbelief. It was like the breath had been knocked out of her. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part came next. I turned to the side and handed her an envelope. She hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling slightly as she took it. She didn't know what was inside, but the way her eyes darted back and forth told me she could feel the weight of the moment. She opened the envelope slowly, like she was trying to delay the inevitable. But when she pulled out the letter and read the first few lines, her expression changed. Her face went white as she read the words on the paper. I could practically hear her heartbeat in the silence that followed. What is this?" she stammered, looking back at me in disbelief. "What is this?" Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw a vulnerability in her that I had never seen before. She wasn't the confident, mocking sister I knew. She wasn't the woman who made me feel small at brunch. No, she was just scared. Terrified even. And it was only then that I realized how much she had taken me for granted. She stuttered again. "Why are you doing this?" I took a deep breath, feeling the calm I had forced myself to maintain settle in. This moment was mine. This was my victory. I looked at her, letting the tension between us build for just a second before I spoke. "You mocked me at brunch," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "In a restaurant I own. You made fun of the person who signs your paycheck." Her mouth opened and closed as though she couldn't quite understand what was happening. But then the weight of my words sank in. Her eyes flickered with realization, like the pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together. It was all there. The mocking tone, the laughter, the insults she'd thrown at me in front of everyone, thinking I would just take it. But I wasn't taking it anymore. She tried to collect herself, but the humiliation was too raw. "You can't do this," she pleaded, her voice desperate now. "I need this job. I'm sorry. Please, I didn't mean it. I didn't know." But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I had spent so many years letting her treat me like I was nothing. And now, here she was, begging me for mercy, and I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. "No," I said, cutting her off. "You mocked me. You belittled me. You turned your back on me when I needed you. And now the tables have turned. You need me." I took a step back, watching her crumble in front of me. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by fear, by the desperate need to keep her world from falling apart. But there was nothing left for her here. The restaurant was mine. The control, the power, it was all in my hands now. And this was the moment when she understood just how far I had come. How much I had built on my own. She had no choice but to accept it. The room remained still, no one daring to speak. I could feel the weight of the silence around us, and for once, it felt satisfying. "I'll have someone escort you out," I said, my voice as cold as the look I gave her. "Please gather your things." She stood there for a moment, frozen, as if she couldn't quite process the situation. But there was nothing left to say. The truth had been revealed. Weeks passed after that confrontation and life went on. I thought about it often, reliving that moment in my mind, but something inside me had shifted. I had gotten what I wanted, what I needed, more than I had even realized. It wasn't about the power, the control, or the victory. It was about the feeling of being finally seen. The respect I had always craved. The closure that had eluded me for so long. Then one day, out of the blue, I received an email from her. I sat down, staring at the subject line, uncertain of what to expect. Slowly, I opened the message and her words hit me like a sudden wave. She apologized. She was ashamed. She admitted that she had been wrong and that she regretted how she treated me, especially during that brunch. She told me that she had been reflecting on everything, on how she had belittled me, assuming I would always be the quiet, invisible one. And now she was sorry for it all. I felt something stir inside me, but it wasn't anger. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was pity. I didn't hate her. I didn't need to. I had already won in ways she would never fully understand. Her apology didn't bring back the lost years, the moments of humiliation, or the pain she had caused me. But it did make me realize just how far I had come. I didn't respond to her immediately. I needed time to process, to let the emotions settle. Eventually I replied, but not in the way she might have expected. I explained, in calm words, that revenge wasn't about destroying someone, about making them suffer the way they made you suffer. It was about standing tall when they thought you never could. I found peace not in firing her, not in taking her down, but in finally being seen for who I was. Not the invisible sister or the mocked one. I was someone who had worked hard, who had built something meaningful, and who deserved respect. That was where my closure came from. As I ended the email, I added a final thought that had been on my mind for a while now. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strength in disguise.